Welcome to Script-Com 2023. 2023, that's a long time in the future. My name is Jeffrey Allen Chase. I am the president of Tennessee Screenwriting Association. We meet, our website is tenscreen.com. It's TENN screen.com. Cats are okay, Tom. Cats are cool.
Cat could still say things I don't want her to say.
And you can get more information about us at tenscreen.com, tenscreen.com. We meet every Wednesday on Zoom. We have a meeting 7 o'clock Central Time. Check us out. This is Script-Com. We put on this once a year, usually in person, but for the last couple of years, because of the pandemic, we've been meeting on Zoom. Hopefully next year, we might be able to bring you into Nashville, Tom, if you want to do this again next year, because you will have at least one, if not two new projects out and in theaters.
Yeah.
And let's see what else. Oh yeah, my lovely co-host is Irish Johnson. Irish is vice president of the Tennessee Screenwriting Association. She is a great writer. She makes films. She's a SAG actress. Yeah, she's
I like the way you're introducing me, Jeff.
And then
I need to have that recorded every morning, and I'll listen to it.
Oh, and by the way, these will all be recorded. These will, we are recording, obviously, all of these. They will be available sometime, maybe next week, as soon as next week. All of the FilmCom interviews also will be available next week. And without any further ado, I want to introduce Tom Schulman. He has been a great supporter of TSA over the last couple of years. Tom spent some time living here in Nashville, which he can tell us about. You will know him from when he broke out. He did some things before, but he really broke out with Dead Poets Society. 86, is that right?
89, I think.
89, okay. Also, what about Bob? Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Medicine Man, 8 Heads in a Duffel Bag, executive producer on Indecent Proposal. It goes on. And the cool thing is, well, I'm sure you got some other things you're going to tell us about, but you have a new movie that you had just finished, I think, last year that's coming out. In fact, I tell you what, I'm going to turn this over to you. Tell us about that project, and then we've got questions, and we'll just see where this thing goes.
And the movie is called Double Down South. It's based on a game of pool called Keno, which has disappeared for maybe since about 20, maybe the turn of the century. Very popular game for about 100 years. They used to play it in 20th Century Pool Hall in Nashville in the Hillsborough area. I used to go there when I was 13, 14 years old, saw the game being played in the back of the room, and sort of put somewhere that in the back of my brain. And maybe a month into the pandemic, a story about that game occurred to me, and I wrote it and raised a little money. And we made, in 2021, we made, or was it 2022? I don't know. I lose track of time, but we made the movie, and it's coming out in January. And hopefully it'll be in Nashville too. It's supposed to be
very cool.
About 60 theaters, 60 cities, I think, in theaters.
Great. And what's the company behind it?
It's an indie film. So, but
this is indie.
Yeah. So
that's right. Very cool. Double Down South.
Yeah.
Before we get into any questions that have been submitted, Tom, is there anything else you want to tell us about other things that are happening with you right now?
I'm working on a project with a couple of Nashvillians and a soon-to-be Nashvillian, Callie Curry, who lives in Nashville, T-Bone Burnett, and Trey Crowder, who's known as the liberal redneck, is moving to Nashville, and brilliant guy and hilarious guy. So we've got a project for Audible. It's 8-part, half-hour, almost like radio play type thing. So
very cool.
We're working on that.
Nice.
Really neat. Really, really neat.
Fun.
Yeah, I'm excited about it.
Iris, I'm going to turn this over to you.
All right. Well, we'll see where we go. So, Tom, I would love to just start with how did you become a screenwriter? Just tell that story.
Yeah. I don't want the short version is
Yeah, the short version, right?
I was at Vanderbilt, and I think my junior year, professor gave us the option of either writing a term paper on one of the novels we were studying or making a movie about one. So everybody in the class teamed up and we all made little movies, and I got hooked. And I found out that there was a camera in the art department at Vanderbilt, and a bunch of us started checking that camera out. They gave us some film. We made little short films, some of which I wrote, and that began the process. I went to work for John Sprague, who was a Vanderbilt graduate, had a company called Image Maker in Nashville, maybe still does, and they made commercials and industrials, and John was sort of a mentor to me. And then I went to USC Film School, sort of thought I knew too much and left, and ended up at a place in LA called the Actors and Directors Lab for 3 years. And that's where I really sort of got it, I guess, and started writing screenplays. Had a great job working for a guy that made educational films, where we'd make a film for 3 weeks and then have 2 weeks off. And those 2 weeks off were great for writers. He hired me to write a screenplay for a low budget horror film that he had found funding for. And we wrote it, and I wrote it, and then found out that the backers were Mormons and didn't actually want to make a horror film. They wanted to make a family film. So I was a first AD on that. And the Mormons were extras on the set of that movie, and they said, we really liked your horror film, why don't you write a comedy for us? So I wrote a comedy with a friend, and those two scripts got me an agent. And then, thus began the slog of writing spec scripts and so forth, and optioning some, selling some, having a couple made TV movies. They're writing stuff that, I thought people wanted to see, but maybe I wasn't, the kind of movies that I would see. And finally just sat down and wrote Dead Poet Society, which had been a story that had been bubbling up in me for quite a while. And 4 years later, it got made.
Wow. So your journey seems unduplicatable, but something that, right?
Everybody's journey. There's no set way in, unfortunately.
Way to do it.
Yeah.
And that's very clear just based on everything you just said. But something that struck me or stood out to me is, as a writer, a talented Oscar-winning screenplay writer, you started with actually filming too. And that struck me as that may have informed your writing so much. I think there's a lot of writers that don't put a camera in their hand and just see what is it, how do you tell the story with, the visuals of the camera? I don't know if you can speak to that at all, but that struck me as a really interesting way to start as a writer.
Yeah, I think I hadn't thought about that, but I think that there's something to that. People ask me, how do you feel about what you write vis-a-vis wanting to direct? And I write everything as if I'm directing it, as if I see every shot. I think I see every shot in the movie. That's the way I don't write down the shots, because people who are readers don't find that annoying, and I do too. But I feel like I'm writing I'm writing something such that the person who reads it feels like they can see the movie itself. Like it's almost like they're watching the movie when they're reading the script. That's what I want them to feel.
Yeah, I feel like that's invaluable skills as a writer, just to have that in the back of your head and know how that goes. So when you write the screenplay, if you could walk us through your process and maybe things that have changed over the years, things you've learned, I started off doing it this way, and then now, because it's not, you've written a lot. So
yeah, I started off just I'd get an idea and I'd sit down and, within a few days I'd start writing it, and I would the thing would be in my head and I would write it. And I found that, I didn't necessarily know where it was going, or if I thought I knew where it was going, it didn't go there. So it became clear that outlining, and a lot of planning is really important. And so I started doing more and more in that. And when I wrote Dead Poets, I came across a method that I've been using ever since. I think I sort of stumbled on something, which is that I had made probably, 175 or 200 pages of notes in my computer about that story, notes scattered all over the place, ideas for characters, lines of dialogue, whole scenes, everything. And it was just too much to keep in your head. So I went through and I put every idea, I compacted the ideas so that they were together. I printed them all out. I sliced up every one of those ideas into its own individual idea. And then I put them in a pile, and I had a stack of paper almost 3 feet tall. And I then just picked up the first piece and I said, oh, this is act one. And I put that together, and I divided that huge stack into 3 stacks, acts 1, 2, and 3. And I picked up act 1, cleared off the floor in my office, and I started moving act 1 pieces around. Oh, this should be the opening. Oh, this one should be scene 3 or 4, somewhere a little bit later, and slowly just put all those pieces out on the floor in order in act 1. And then I picked them up, put them on 8 by 10, or was it 8 by 10, whatever a piece of paper is, tacked them onto papers, 3-hole punch those papers, did act 2, did act 3 that way. And at that point, I had a notebook 175 or 200 pages long, too long, but it was essentially a Bible for how to write that screenplay. And
Okay.
the thing that really works about that method, more than just the tedium of it, is that when I would put scene 1 down and then I had scene 3, and I had no idea how I was going to get from 1 to 3, and I would think about it for a moment, couldn't figure it out. But while I was putting all those other pieces of paper out, suddenly the answer would come to me. So this method is, I found, a really good way of sort of unlocking your unconscious or subconscious, such that you don't worry about anything. It's pretty relaxing. You're not putting any pressure on yourself, and you can have those little aha eureka moments as you go. And you've got other strips of paper that are blank, and as you get ideas, you write things down on that, and you put those down, and pretty soon you've got the whole thing together. On Dead Poets Society, for example, I didn't really have an ending. I thought that once the character of Neil had committed suicide, that the teacher there would be some sort of trial of the teacher at the school. But in the back of my mind, I knew that was ridiculous. They wouldn't have a trial; they'd just fire him. But I wanted the boys to somehow participate in his leaving. And as I was, ruminating on other scenes, I went, oh, no trial. Of course not. It's just going to be this scene in the classroom. So it just came to me while I was working on something else. I didn't have to put any pressure on myself to find that ending. So I've used that method ever since, except on a couple of screenplays. And when I don't use it on screenplays, it's not good. It's tedious. It takes a few days, but it's worth the time.
Yeah. And so I'll call it like the more brainstorming part, where you're just creating the notes and you're not being too strict with yourself. You're just allowing yourself to like whatever's coming.
Yep.
How long would you say that part of it would go? Like, maybe it's different for every screenplay or project, but generally is that?
It goes through the whole process. Even after I've got a very detailed outline, I'm getting those kinds of brainstorming type of ideas, and for scenes I'm not even anywhere near writing, but those ideas keep coming.
Well,
and after the first draft, after the second draft, all the way until they take it away from me.
Okay. Well, and this is, this is something you came up with. I love it. I really, really honestly love this approach, because I feel like it matches the way my brain works, which is like very much think of 100 things. But like you said, it's hard to keep it in order. So I like the visual of placing it out. But I don't know if I've ever seen that. It's said exactly.
For me, making those notes is sort of a process of making sure I don't forget anything. So I'm very free form when I'm thinking about a story. If an idea for dialogue comes from me in the car, I really worry that I'm going to forget it. So I'll pull over and write it down. So I worry I can't keep it all in my head. So.
Well, this leads me to like what you just said. Somebody had written a question earlier and had sent it in when we asked for suggestions for questions. And they said, when do you know if an idea is good? When do you pull over the car and say, this one I need to write down? When are you like, forget it, I'm going to keep driving? Do you know?
I think all ideas are good for a long time. And then as I'm writing, I realize some of them just don't fit. So I trust everything that I think of is valuable and worth at least writing down, because I don't know where it's going to go. But and then later, as the piece starts to take shape, lots of the ideas just fall away.
So in Dead Poet Society and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, these feel like very different movies in a lot of ways. But I'm curious if there's anything about them as a writer that you find similar, or not speaking to just like the 3-act structure or, protagonist, antagonist. Is there anything about them that we might not see that you as the writer felt like, yeah, they're different stories, but or if they're not similar at all, I guess, what does that feel like to you as the writer to be like, have such a different, totally different genres, different everything?
Well, they're both about a little gang or ensemble of kids, different ages, but that's what they have in common. And for me, maybe the process of writing Honey was similar, or rewriting Honey was similar. When I'm writing a script, once I understand the function of a character in a story, then I sort of cast around in my brain, and who do I know, who did I ever know in my life that would sort of fit in there best, and I'll cast them in that part. And so with Honey, which had to be rewritten very quickly, I did that. And so even though every one of those kids in that story was inspired to some extent by somebody I knew in life, and the same with Dead Poets. So from a sort of creative standpoint, they were the same that way. And I think they picked me to write it because it was an ensemble of kids. Both Honey was.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
if I can piggyback on that, on both of those, on both of those movies and any others you'd like to comment about, were those ideas that were given to you by producer, studio, et cetera, or were those your spec ideas that you wrote and turned in?
Dead Poets was a spec idea, and I use the word spec loosely because I think of spec as something you're actually hoping to make money from, and I don't think I thought at the time that story was particularly commercial. But Honey was already it was a rewrite, so it was a project set up at Disney and given to me about 5-6 days before production started, with the mandate to turn a drama into a comedy.
Did you get your undergraduate degree at Vanderbilt? Did I understand that?
I did. Yeah.
Was it philosophy or was it something else?
Philosophy.
Philosophy. Okay, just making sure. I didn't want to ask this question if this wasn't accurate. Somebody sent in a question saying, did your philosophy degree influence the way you tell stories or create characters, do you think?
I think that it did in a negative way, because I think in the first few scripts that I wrote, I was looking for ways to sort of get these high-minded philosophical ideas into these stories. And I think that's not a good way to approach writing. If those things end up in there, great, but I don't think I think drama is a different animal. It's not philosophy. So it was a bit of a snag for me, I think. But so yeah,
you do.
I think philosophy is a wonderful major.
Sure.
But and for someone who would understand that early, not a problem. But for me, it was sort of a bit of an impetus to use some of the stuff I'd been thinking about that way.
Ooh. So somebody just asked if you could tell us your view of the writer's strike, and more particularly the outcome.
Well, I was on the negotiating committee, so I saw it from that perspective. I think, first of all, I've been on, I think this was my 4th negotiating committee, and never been on a negotiating committee this well prepared, with this many really smart writers and with this many really brave writers. Mm-hmm. So I think the organization of that, starting at the top, from the negotiating committee, and the chairs of the negotiating committee, and our executive director, was just extraordinary. And I think that is what allowed us to succeed. And I think we did succeed. I was as always disappointed before with the results of our negotiating committee's the final contract, but not this time. So we hung in there. The strike was incredibly well managed, and I think we got a lot of what we wanted.
Y'all hung in there for sure.
Yeah. And it was great that we had SAG, Screen Actors Guild, with us. That was a huge boost for us, and we worked well together. And I think writers this time, when I joined the committee, I'm not a TV writer, so I was unaware of what had been going on in television for the last few years. I thought with the sort of advent of Netflix and a lot of the streamers that the TV writing world had actually, was a great place, and I found out it actually wasn't, and that because of that, we needed to get a lot of things to sort of remedy the problems in TV. So I learned a lot about that, and I think we did our job.
Yeah, you did. Thank you. Thank you to you all for doing that.
It was the members and the sort of just the persistence and hard work of the members that really did it, and the solidarity of the guild was incredible. Yeah, I just we as members of the negotiating committee, we went to the picket lines every day, and I was just amazed at how persistent and
dedicated to it.
Yeah, it was great.
That's Jeff, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. And actually, this might dovetail into something else. One of the questions came in earlier. This is about what about Bob? Somebody asked or said, there's a line in the movie delivered by Bill Murray. Some people like Neil Diamond, some people don't. The question,
the world is divided into two types of people: those who like Neil Diamond and those who don't. Yeah.
Now the question is, he wanted to know: was that an ad lib on Murray's part, or was that in the script?
No, that was in the script.
Okay. And then the next question is that dovetails off of that: do you like to be on set as the writer, or do you not want to be on set? And when you're a producer, do you want the writer there to make changes, et cetera, or not?
Mm-hmm. Well, as a producer, yes, I want the writer there. And as the writer, I want to be on set, and I will be on set, but I don't like being on set. I'm kind of bored, and it's what they say about flying a plane. It's hours of boredom and a few minutes of panic, and that's sort of what it's like to be on the set. Things would go well, and all of a sudden something doesn't work, and you right there on the spot got to solve a problem. So yeah. But it's mostly tedious, a lot of waiting. If you're not directing or acting in it, you really don't have much to do. It's spend too much time in craft services. So yeah. But I think as a writer, you should be there if allowed. And so I'm there if I can be.
Have you had any of the talented actors that have played some of your roles come over to you on set to ask you questions about their character, like Robin Williams? Or
yeah, but I always say, as the writer, go ask the director. Okay. I don't want to undercut the director. Yeah, that's his job. But I'll tell the director the actor came over to me, needs an answer.
Something
for some reason they're too shy to ask the director, which they never are. So. And usually they ask the director,
Yeah. Okay.
And a lot of directors don't want writers around because they don't want the actors looking over at the writer to see whether they're doing well. They want the actor to have only a relationship with them.
That sounds right. That sounds potentially confusing, and like you obviously are a professional and figured it out right away. Yeah. That's cool. I was thinking about the strike question, and to go back to a little bit more on that. AI was part of the negotiating for that. As a writer, how do you feel about writers using AI as a tool? I don't know if we can stop it. Where do you stand with that? Have you tried using AI?
Yeah, I've looked at ChatGPT, and I've done all kinds of experiments with it. I think it's good at some things. I think it can generate story ideas. You still have to, as a writer, decide which ones are good and which ones aren't. It's far from infallible. It makes messy mistakes. It's limited, but obviously it's going to get better. And if it gets way better, it could replace writers. A lot of the AI developers think that's coming. So, and the fact that they think so scares me. But right now, I think it's just a tool, just like you'd use, Wikipedia or Google or any other search engine. It's a way of, generating some ideas. And then, but again, as a writer, you have to look at them and go, this one's good, this one's not, whatever. I don't think it's great at dialogue. I don't think it's great at writing scenes. So, just a tool, and I think writers should use it.
So someone asked this earlier, for someone who lives in LA, and I don't, Jeff doesn't, maybe most of our viewers might not, I don't know, maybe some do. But how would you suggest, or do you have any advice for how a screenwriter would get the attention of a manager or representation if you live in Nashville, Tennessee?
I mean, agents and reps in general don't like to read. They don't even like to watch movies. I mean, as I mentioned, I made an indie film, and it was hard to get, sales agents just to watch the movie. We had to make a trailer of the movie in order to get them interested in watching the movie. So the same thing sort of applies to screenplays. The best thing would be to win a contest or do well at a contest, to do well on the blacklist, submit your stuff that way. Finding somebody who knows somebody is the best way to get the attention of an agent or manager. And even then it's hard. So, I look back, and I mean, when I lived in Nashville, I loved Nashville. I didn't want to leave and didn't want to come to LA, but, and I, sort of look back on it, wonder whether I could have done well without it. I don't think so.
Yeah. At the time you feel like it was necessary for you to go out.
Yeah,
well,
different times, right now, because it's so easy to, make a short film very cheaply. One could shoot a scene or two, or make a trailer of, or make a whole movie for very little money. And at that point you have a calling card. Now, if you don't want to direct, if you just want to write, you can find somebody else to direct it for you, but what I'm getting at is that it's easier. No one can stop you. One of the good things about writing is nobody can stop you from writing. You can sit in your room and do it. If you're an actor, it's harder because you need, you need other people to participate. So, so my suggestion is always write a lot. Don't worry too much about getting it out there. If something's really good and friends and people love it, it will get recommended, and if you push on it, you'll find that people respond and it gets to where it needs to go. That's an idealistic and simple-minded way, but I do believe that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so Carrington in the chat asked, when you were reworking Honey, I Shrunk the Kids from drama to comedy, this is new to me, did you have to pull whole structure apart and put it back together, or could you just sort of line edit in the funniness? Or did you have to rework a lot, at a deeper level?
A little bit of both. I mean, but I don't think you're line editing in the funniness in the sense that you've got to reconceptualize all the characters. Otherwise, because they'd be fun. And you can throw in things here and there. But for me, it was, at least in my imagination, a complete retelling of the story using the structure, but, repopulating it with other characters and a whole other sort of sensibility.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know that that's the history of that screenplay, but that would be fascinating to read it as a drama.
I think it's around maybe the early draft. It was called it's called Grounded, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. And my understanding is that about 2 weeks before the production was to begin, Rick Moranis was not happy that it wasn't funny enough, and Disney had asked the team that was on board to they wanted to do the B ride and the other special effects stuff sort of analog. They wanted to have like a person in a bee suit, that sort of thing. So the studio said, we got to see that. So they did a one-day test, showed it to the studio, and the studio fired the entire team, the director, the writers, the producers, everybody. And with, very short time, I think Rick Moranis at that point said, I'm out. And they said, well, let us see what we can do, redo the screenplay, so forth, keep this going. They hired Joe Johnson, who was a model maker at ILM, to be the director, his first-time director. They hired me and said, you've got a week to rewrite this. And they had a Gideon and Evans, Ray Gideon, Bruce Evans, who had written Stand By Me. They were producers on the movie. They ended up not being producers on the movie because they had a deal at Universal. Universal ultimately wouldn't let them out. But they were there when I started, and they were sort of a great resource to have these other writers helping me, brainstorming and so forth
Okay.
all day, every day while,
So the week
So-
you had to do the rewrite, you had other writers in a room with you at your disposal if you needed
yeah, they're acting as readers and producers and brainstormers, and Joe Johnston too. So,
Okay.
there was a scene where, Wayne is looking for the kids in the backyard. And I said, well, if he walks around in the backyard, he could kill them, at which, he needs to float up above, at which point Joe Johnston drew a television with a big pole and some sort of fulcrum, and Wayne floating on one side and the TV is the counterweight. And we had that little drawing, even put that drawing in the script. So it was that kind of brainstorming, collaborative effort. But
when you got the call for that job or that offer, was it mostly exciting? Was it
no.
theater?
No. I couldn't. I told my agent, forget it. I'm not.
Like, this is
and
too much.
He said, I've already said yes on your behalf. And I said, you can't do that. He said, I've done it. You got to be at the studio tomorrow at 8. So,
so there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrifying.
It's nice to be loved.
Yeah. That is great.
At that rate, I don't think I could find anybody else, stupid enough to try to come in and do that. But
what a challenge! I mean, it rose to it.
It's horrible.
It sounds terrifying to me. But
I got a quick question.
You
for
go on, Jeff. Yeah.
Which is more important to you, Tom, or which do you feel is more important to the producer or whatever, the log line or the pitch?
Well, in the old, the log line, if it's high concept or, snappy enough, it's the most important thing, because it's ultimately what the head of the studio is, going to buy. And a lot of heads of studios don't read anything, but if they hear a log line that they like, and with a cast or a potential cast that makes sense in that to them is the hit movie or your hit idea. So, but you don't have the log, if all you have is the log line, good luck. You got to have pretty much everything these days and more. Nowadays, you have to have the log line, the pitch, the actors, the director, everything before the studio will even consider it at this point. It's amazing how many projects that are basically fully developed and cast, they don't do. It's as opposed to the old days when I started, if you had the pitch, a really good log line and a pitch, that they'd buy it, and in the room. It doesn't happen that much anymore.
Wow.
Need to do a little bit more work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Elvis says, Tom says he writes his scripts as if he's going to direct them. Have you ever had a problem when you're writing scripts for other directors and then there's a disconnect? Like you realize, oh, the way I've written that, they won't understand it, or no one's going to get that but me. Does that happen? I guess
not from my side, but from the director's side.
From the director's side. Yeah. Is that a rewrite or is that just,
It can be, directors. Cynical writers will say that all directors do is essentially pitch a rewrite. So I don't think that's true, but certainly there is that phase of the process where you, the writer, meet with if in most cases meet with the director and try to see eye and eye about what the director changes the director wants.
Okay. Alex asked, how was your time at Montgomery Bell Academy? How did that impact your life and your work?
It was a major time in my life. First of all, Sam Pickering who was sort of the model for the Robin Williams character in Dead Poets Society, was my sophomore English teacher there. Wonderful guy, antic guy, really loving teacher and funny, and didn't come back after that. And I think the next year there were all these rumors what happened to him. People thought, he had an affair with the headmaster's daughter. He had an affair with the headmaster's wife, those kind of rumors. And we were all too afraid to ask. And of course, if we'd asked, we'd have just found out that he got a better job teaching at University of Connecticut. But that left that story sort of open in my brain for years later to me to sort of, I think if I had known what happened to him, I might have never written the story, but just, and,
Yeah.
made a lot of great friends at MBA. We had the head of the English department was Mrs. Lowry, who was, just a fanatic about reading and writing. So, it was a great education.
Jeff, I'm trying to read through some of these on the chat.
Well, I'll throw one out there for you. You have written in so many different genres for a new writer trying to make waves, trying to get noticed. Should they stick to just one genre and get noticed there, which will make, I'm sure, their manager and agent happy because they got that universe to pitch to? Or should they just really concentrate on writing really great, passionate stuff?
The great passionate stuff always sounds good, but to me, it's, basically you just want to write great stories. You have to constantly, sort of check yourself to find out or say, is this a great story? In a lot of ways, to me, one way to find out is to test it is just to tell it to friends and anybody who listen. And if you sort of see their eyes light up a little kind of, oh, wow, when you tell the story, then it's got a chance. So, I have a lot of personal stories that I think are good, but I don't think are great. And therefore, I don't think probably wouldn't get made. So, I often wrong, but I try to concentrate on the great stories and on any genre. It's sort of, I love all kinds of movies. So I'm arrogant enough or to try to write anything that I think, is a great story in any genre.
Mm-hmm. Anne asked for Double Down South. Is that your first time behind the camera? I think technically no.
No.
And do you enjoy directing or prefer writing or the combo? Do you know?
I love directing. I love working with the actors and watching the story come alive as you rehearse and get towards shooting. I love all the planning and the sort of, all the deciding of what things are going to look like and how it's going to all work and where the camera is going to go, all that, and the actual directing is there's a constant tension because you're racing against the clock to try to make your days. But on most days, if it's going well, it's a wonderful experience. So, and I think I prefer being with people rather than sitting in a room alone trying to solve all these problems. But, as a writer and director on the set, I'm rewriting constantly. So there's that part of the process too.
Okay. Lisa asked, is it possible to make an independent film and shop it in today's world and market? And I think, yeah. I mean,
I know it's tough, but there's tons of sales agents, tons of distributors out there, that seems to me a very healthy festival world, and movies get seen and they get distributed.
What sorts? This is from Nelson Spear. What sorts of external stimulus? Be careful here, if any, do you use when writing? Like, I know a couple of writers who love to have music on, whatever. Other writers prefer dead silence. They don't want anything coming into their head, which is, external, that they can't deal with. I'm kind of that way. I like quiet. What's your general mode for writing?
I would like to be able to write with music. So I put the music on and about 5 minutes later, it annoys me and I have to turn it off. So I generally like quiet. However, once I get started, it doesn't really matter what's going on in the background. I don't even notice it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But,
you can focus.
If you're lucky enough to be able to write with music going, I think that's great. It's soothing or, exciting, whatever. But for me, ultimately, it's silence is the best thing.
Silence is golden.
Yeah.
Hey, that'd be a good song title.
Yeah. Right. So an anonymous person said, I watched the recent documentary of Sylvester Stallone and the trauma he suffered with his father and how he overcame his suffering through writing and creating Rocky. I feel that many of us have gone through some form of trauma. Did you feel that your experience in writing Dead Poet Society, was there healing thing that happened for you in that writing?
People say, and I think it's somewhat true, that the journey of your script, the theme, the journey of the main characters is sort of a proxy for the journey that you need to make in your life, And the only thing I can say about Dead Poets Society is that, from the time I was about 14 to probably till I wrote it, I was pretty shy and very, terrified of public speaking, as I think many people are, and but really shy about, raising my hand in class, that sort of thing. And so maybe even pathologically shy. I think part of what I hoped as a writer was that I could just, send it in and never have to, they just make it. And it would be that I'd never have to show up or talk or defend or, that was pretty naive. But so I think the process of writing that script helped me sort of come out as a person. So, I don't think they're all that way, but people would say they are all that way, that there's something that you're writing about that's a way of healing something in yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such a good story.
I've got a question which sort of follows that. What keeps you busy nowadays mostly? Is it work on assignment, either rewriting, or somebody says, hey, I want Schulman to write this? And it's sort of a two-part question. Have you adapted a book before?
I've adapted one book. Didn't go well. It was a book told in the first person. And after I wrote the script, they said, we've decided we don't want a narration in this thing. So it's like, oh my God. And the narrator's voice was what was funny and quirky in the book. So it was really hard to get that to work in a script.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what were the first part of the question?
What keeps you busy? Is it assignment work or, because obviously you've got some projects, Double Down South is your own project, but what keeps you mostly busy? Is it still assignment work?
It's both. I try to do both at the same time. And, I've this Audible thing I mentioned, I wouldn't really call it an assignment, except we created it and set it up, but it's now a work for hire piece. So I try to do work for hire at the same time. I've got other ideas bubbling up, and when I'm on a break from the work for hire, I'll be making notes or doing whatever on my other stuff. Can't work on one until I'm actually writing the project, writing the script. I can't work on something all the time. I need time. My brain needs time off to have those moments in the shower and whatnot. So working on multiple projects is a good way to sort of let the subconscious work on other things.
Have you ever had a script that was rejected and you completely rewrote it or morphed it because you felt like there was something about it that really worked, turned it into something different, and then it actually got accepted?
All but the last part. Yes, I've had a couple of projects that were rejected, and I thought the sort of basic idea was strong, so I tried retooling them, and they still didn't get made.
No?
By the way, this is a record-setting event. I won't tell you how many, but we have quite a few people signed on at the moment. Oh, yeah. This is the most people that we have had at a Script-Com ever. In fact, it probably combines the last 4 or 5 years, including in person. So we got a lot of people signing on.
Send me my cut,
Okay.
We will actually. Santa Claus is going to be kind.
That's right. I have a question that I was thinking of when I saw some pictures when I was looking at your bio and things like that. And I saw a picture of you with the Oscar in your hand with like Jane Fonda next to you. I think, was it Jane Fonda?
Yeah.
Oh God, that just like, yeah. So like in my fantasy dream world, like I would just want to hear from you, like walking up, hearing your name called. Like, I know it's a dream of a lot of screenplay writers. Like, oh my, that's just, you've made it, right? So well, yeah. For a minute, let's just talk about the what that felt like in that moment. Do you remember it all?
Oh, sure. You can't forget something like that.
Okay. I hear,
yeah. I was, as I said, I'm very shy. The last thing I didn't even want to go to the ceremony. I thought, why do I have to go? If I win, they'll give my statue to somebody and I'll still have the statue. And my parents and my wife said, we're going, you're going. So I went. And, honestly, while they were reading off the nominees, I was just saying to myself, don't let it be me. I did not have to go up there in front of those, however millions they say are watching the Oscars. But it was me. And as I was walking up, a friend I didn't know was there was in the orchestra pit, a singer down there. Hey, Tom. And I started talking to her. And the person next to me said, don't you want to go up on stage? I'm okay. So I went up there and, the speech that I had written, because they make you write a speech. They tell you everybody must be prepared. Went completely out of my head. And I forgot to thank a couple of people. And Jane Fonda took me over to the elevator at I think it was Dorothy Chandler. We were going to go down into the basement, and she said, "You just won an Oscar. You look terrible." What? I said, "Well, I forgot a couple of people." And she said, "Oh, well, you can thank them next time."
Oh,
good for you.
That's a great line.
Thanks, Jane. And so we went down into the basement of the building, and they have these big, giant plastic Oscars on a little stage, and there's a bunch of reporters in front of the stage, and the reporters started asking questions. Jane had just come back to Hollywood basically after years of absence. So she said, "This is Tom. He just won this Oscar. Do you have any questions?" "Jane, what's life like with Ted Turner? Jane, what's your next project? Jane, where'd you get that dress?" She goes, wait. This is not about me. This is about Tom. Please direct your questions to Tom. Pause. Somebody said, "Tom, what's it like to get an Oscar from Jane?" She goes, "That's it," and walked me off the stage. And so I took my statue, snuck back into the audience and sat there. And you sort of realize as a writer kind of where you are.
Yes, I know for sure.
And, so that was my experience.
And Tom Wood says the Marvel movies seem to be very polarizing, with criticism from Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, Sean Penn, and others. Do you think that they have been good for the industry? And would you ever want to try to tackle that genre?
No, on the last part. But, for me, they've become formulaic. And I think they have trouble getting out of their own way because the formula works. It's huge, huge box office for them. So they're not going to change the formula. I love some of them, don't love others, but I'm sure everybody can say that. So have they been good for the industry? It's in my guts, I would say no, because I think they've dominated to the point where they are sort of the only kind of movie that the studios want to make, whether it's an actual Marvel movie or a Marvel type clone. The notion of that kind of fantasy franchise is stuck in the brains of all the studios. And, at the end of the day, they'll prefer and choose that kind of thing over almost anything else. So it's pushed out the kind of movies that I love. And those kind of movies have become more indie, they got the indie label now and harder to get theaters, etc. So I'm hoping that they're just, a placeholder for now, that the Marvel movies are just holding audiences in place till audience tastes change and something for me more interesting comes back.
Jeff, do you have a
we got like 2 more minutes. Quick question. What's your opinion on screenwriting contests?
I think they're good. They're good to, one should not take rejection at those contests seriously, but if you win one of those things or, do well, they're a good way to get, some attention from agents and managers or producers. So I would say enter lots of them. For me, exposing your work everywhere you can is a good thing.
That was my next question. Yeah.
Always has been. And, it can be devastating and disappointing and, a kind of rejection, but you learn and that's how you grow.
Thank you so much. We are so appreciative to have you take your time.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.